Okay, so hello and welcome to the Maryland Made Podcast. The Maryland Made Podcast provides timely, relevant, and practical information to empower student athletes to explore their potentials and pursue their passions. We're going to start today's episode a little bit different. So we're going to start with the question of the day. What is your favorite work hype song? So something that gets you motivated, something that like gets the creative juices going. Who wants to go first?
Nate wants to go first.
I kind of do want to go first, but only because it changes, Like recently, I've been on the Afro Beats wave. I've been listening to Wizkid. He just dropped the album, and the song is called Every Day. So that's a good one. I also like Burna Boy and Last. You can't go wrong with that. That's gonna set the mood every time.
So as the old person of the group, I don't know who any of these people are. So I'm going to take it old school. I got to go gospel. So Melodies from Heaven, especially when they break it down at the end of the song, can't go wrong with that.
Sydney?
I will say for me, sometimes it just depends on the day. So some days it'll be gospel, some days it'll be jazz. But I'll say that one song that just gets me real motivated is This Girl's on Fire by Alicia Keys.
The banger. Mine, you guys know how much I love Rod Wave. So it's Rod Wave, Keep Going. If you haven't listened to it, I suggest listening to it. It's a great motivational, just great. But thank you all for sharing. Today, for our listeners, if you haven't caught on already, we have the Maryland Made team here. So Nate, myself, Sydney Anderson, Resa, and Sydney Strong. And you will hear from us regarding the concept of work-life balance today. So by definition, work-life balance involves the minimization of work-related stress and the establishing of a stable and sustainable way to work while maintaining health and general well-being. How do you all define work-life balance, and do you feel like you're actually able to achieve it?
I'll jump in. I think, for me, work-life balance is continuing to do the great work that I'm doing in my job, but also maintaining the relationships outside of work, right? So whether that be family, that be friends, and living the lifestyle that I want. I think those are kind of what I think about when I think about work-life balance. Is it achievable? It depends on, I think, what part of your career you're in, right? And I think about the career industry you're in. I would say when I first set out in this industry, I don't know that I had any work-life balance. I was work. Life will happen when it happens. Now I'm at a point where I'm probably more life than work most days. But I think that's because I'm trying to catch up on a life that I didn't, do when I was younger.
I'll go ahead and jump in, and I'm thinking about to achieve work-life balance. I think it's all about prioritizing certain things. I think Risa, you kind of alluded to it, just focusing on an outside of work kind of aspect, but I think that's how you kind of achieve that, like just making sure things don't slip because you get in a weekly rotation, weekly routine of going to work, getting up, coming back, maybe going to the gym and coming back, cooking, coming back. And some things can kind of just go by the wayside. So just prioritizing, maybe contacting friends, family, and maybe just taking time out for yourself. That's a good one too, making sure you take out time for yourself and not always giving your time to other people.
And to piggyback,
can I add to what Nate just said?
Yeah.
We get a lot of sick days as full-time employees. I encourage you to use a sick day for a mental health day, because mental health days are really real. Even if you just want to lay in your bed and do nothing, that's another great way to try to achieve what you need.
I love that. Sydney?
Work-life balance. I will say this is something that I'm still trying to define myself. I'll say kind of being early in my career, I was closer to family and friends. So finding that balance, picking up the phone easy, just hang out after work. Whereas, the distance that I am, which is 16 hours away, it kind of plays a big part. Not to say I don't have friends out here. It's just trying to find that work-life balance. A lot of those friends that I do have were in different industries. So their availability is not the same as mine. And so I'll say that is still somewhat a challenge for me. And so I've realized sometimes when they're available, I'm not. And so, like Nate mentioned, I sometimes use that time for self-care days or those mental health days. But I do think that I will be able to achieve that eventually.
Right. And I feel like we're kind of in a similar space, being that we both are early in our career. But I feel like for me, I echo all of your sentiments, but for me, work-life balance is really knowing when to separate certain things, whether it's like just unplugging. This is something I'm still learning to do. I know as early professionals, it's kind of like you want to excel in everything you do. You want to just make sure everything's done to a T. So definitely trying to find a way to really separate and just get that work-life balance. But those were interesting takes from all of us. I think we're all in different spaces in our lives and different time periods. So it's good to hear the different perspectives. Considering that many of us have worked in or are currently miles away from our home-based family and friends, what do you guys think it's like to maintain those relationships? Sydney, you kind of touched on it a little bit.
So I'll say I think it's really important for birthdays. So by everybody's contact, I have that. And so I'll say just for my dad's side of the family, literally almost every day of the week is somebody's birthday. So if I don't talk to them all the time, like I just notified in the morning that, like I'll send that, or I'll, send a voice memo and say, like happy birthday, or somebody in my family will remind me. So that's how I just sometimes keep that communication. But then I'll say maintaining those relationships. Sometimes when I do like take lunch breaks or walks, like I'll just call, check in on family. So that's how I maintain those.
I like to FaceTime. Cause I'm a visual person, so like I can text. Actually, I don't like texting. I don't like to text. I kind of don't like calling either, like on the phone, but like FaceTime is okay, especially like with family, just because you kind of get to see what they're doing in their everyday life. Maybe you see their environment. I see my parents, I call them all the time and they're like chilling and stuff like that. So that's always good to see. So I like to utilize FaceTime often.
Well, I'm probably the one that's at home right now. But obviously in my career, I think probably out of all of y'all, I've taken the longest distance leaving here to go to the West Coast. So being 3,000 miles away from pretty much every person I knew, like family, friends, whatever, it was hard because it's also a 3-hour time difference, right? And so sometimes that looked like on my drive to work at 8 o'clock, I'm calling my mother to just check in. And it was a 5-minute drive, but it was like that daily check-in that I would have with her. I agree with Nate, like, thank God for FaceTime, because I don't know that I would have moved, for that job if we didn't have technology like we do now. But it's like that constant, like you feel like you got to be attached to your phone because you never know, good, bad, or indifferent, what's going on at home. And like, I suffered some major losses while I was away for 4 years, and like having to figure out funding to be able to fly back home for some of the emergency situations. I think these are all the things that people don't talk about when they talk about, taking jobs in other spaces or even taking jobs in certain industries. And like the fact that you will have to up and move sometimes, especially in athletics, because there sometimes is this stagnant movement within your own organization. And so you might have to jump to a different school. And what does that look like for you? And so again, I think about, and funny enough, was on the phone with my mentor who told me to take the job on the West Coast. Like, it was a great opportunity because it got me where I am, but did I lose some of that life factor, right? Like, I think about that. But I think, we all got a path that got to walk in. I wouldn't change it for where I'm at now.
Right. So many things just went through my head as you just said all that. And I know we've talked about this, but it's like my family is a big part of my identity. And to the point where I don't know if I would travel as far just based off of them. So it's like I need to be able to hop in a car and get to them if I need to, if it's an emergency, if it's just anything in general, I need to be able to put hands on my family. So I'm quick to hop in the car, go prioritize, schedule, but basically just really planning out the different things that are coming up and trying to make, obviously we aren't going to make everything with our family and friends, right? So it's like just trying to prioritize, make what you can, and just build those relationships and maintain them via FaceTime or different aspects like that. So next question, what would you guys say is the hardest part of work-life balance for you? I'll start. I'll say mine. I kind of touched on it a little bit. It's really unplugging. Like once I go home, it's like, I want to relax. I want to, just chill, watch my shows. But it's like, okay, I got to do this. Okay, this needs to be done tomorrow. Okay, what's for next week? So it's like my mind kind of just, it's hard to shut off. So trying to find ways to unplug is definitely something that I struggle with, that I'm trying to work on.
And I will piggyback off of that. So I will say, like, coming in that first year, I was literally the same way. And I started trying to, create different boundaries for, okay, when I come home, like, I'm not opening my laptop, depending on what we had going on that week. And I would feel like there was always something. Like, I could be watching TV or on FaceTime with a family member, and I can be like, there's still something else that I feel like I need to get done, because that is what the constant routine I've been in. And then I found myself this year, like, kind of being back in that, So I think that's what I struggle with, is trying to figure out how to unplug, and then probably, like, just manage time better so that we can get that unplugging time, because that's important for us to have.
I mean, I feel like that's it right there. But for me, it's more like personal, like just trying to find time for myself. A lot of times, like I said, I'll be like in a coffee shop and I'm still thinking about work, when I can maybe try to be working on my personal business or doing some personal research on handling different personal issues. I think that is major for me. I also think about like managing personal expectations, because I think that is something that I think about a lot when I'm by myself. And that's why if I'm by myself and I'm watching TV or I'm doing something that's not work related, I'm like, I can make something at work better if I spend more time doing something, which is, it's kind of counterproductive, because you should need that time to like take a break, like Sydney said, unplug a little bit, where I'm over here trying to make it 10 times better, and it's okay. So
I think the hardest part, like in my space, right, like being the leader of this unit and like being very well connected with doing other stuff with other units in our department and organization, is just like telling people like when I can't help them, right? I think oftentimes people look at me as like this facilitator, like this space where if sports psych needs something, or if NIL working person needs something, or right, like I become this hub of like a lot of information. And so there are times if I'm on vacation, somebody knows I'm out of office, they'll text because they know I know what's going on in multiple spaces. And so I've learned to not respond to those texts. Like there's an out of office for a reason, but it's also like a lot of people in our industry don't have boundaries. They don't care that you're out of the office. And so sometimes I think the hard part of work-life balance is to say, like, listen, I'm out, like, figure it out on your own, or like find someone else, because just like you don't want to be interrupted on your vacation, I don't want to be interrupted on mine. So it's sometimes those crucial conversations that you need to have that people don't want to have because they don't want to rock the boat. But I'm a rock it because somebody has to.
I was gonna say, to piggyback on that, it's kind of what you said, but like just learning how to say no sometimes too. Like if you're doing too much and you're overextended, then say no, so that you can feel better about yourself and whatever you need to handle originally. So
yeah.
Right. And would you guys say, in your opinion, is it more important to understand the life you want to live versus just creating or looking for work-life balance?
I mean, I think it's something I said to you, Sydney Anderson. Like, we were having this conversation and we were walking out to the car one day, and you were like, and you said it earlier, I don't know that I could take a job that's too far away from my family. And back when I was your age, like, I don't think that was my mindset. And now I'm sitting in a space where it's definitely more about a lifestyle than trying to create or look for a job that gives me the balance I want, right? Like I, at this point, want to be able to do a job, have a career that allows me all of the flexibility in the world where I can still achieve what the organization's goal is, but that my lifestyle is not affected, whether that's financially, whether that's me just traveling, whatever that looks like. At this point at 37, I'm looking at all of the things for my lifestyle and then matching my career and energy towards that. But when I was your age, like you said, that's not what I was looking at. I was looking at work to get me to where I want to be versus trying to mesh my life more in front.
Right. And I think a big part of that, that we've all talked about is like knowing what you're getting into out of college, because we're trying to prepare these student athletes for their careers, but it's like really being transparent and letting them know, because if I'm being honest, like I love SEC, I love everything about bettering the student athlete experience, but but it's like some things I didn't necessarily know what I was getting myself into until I actually worked certain jobs.
I think on that note too, just understanding the lifestyle. So just like you said, in sports, you got to get up and move. I moved multiple times. I think when I was at Georgia State, like earlier in my career, I realized that like I'm going to have to move. And somebody told me that. He was like, to move up, you got to move out. And like once you accept that, it's like easier to, I think, navigate that space, because you know that's what comes with it. I know we were talking yesterday. It's like if you were a fighter, yeah, they have different hours, but their lifestyle, you might have to work 24 hours straight, even though you get a couple of days off. That's just specific to that industry. So I think it's good to tell our students too, if you want to make a certain amount of money and live in this type of lifestyle, then you don't need to pick this job. Like it's not gonna balance out for you. So I think just understanding that lifestyle too.
But to that point, at what point do we change the narrative or change the norm? Like, I get it, it's a lifestyle, it's the norm of college athletics or whatever profession you're in. But at the same time, it's like, if we're trying to break generational curses and really get these students to change the world, then.
But I think that's like putting information in front of them, right? So I don't know if y'all saw, well, it popped up on CNN a couple of days ago, but I guess I might have the wrong country, but New Zealand is what's coming into my brain. Across the country, they started a 4-day work week, right? So the president was started at the top, where their leaders in charge of that country said, hey, we recognize that maybe we don't need to work 5 days a week. Every industry is going to go down to 4-day work weeks, and let's see what that looks like. Productivity went up, people's lifestyle habits changed, right? So this is where I say, like, the Gen Zers are going to be the ones that change and shift our country, because they're the ones who are saying, I don't want to go in the office. I'd rather work remote. And yeah, there are some that do probably want to go in the office, but they want more flexibility. And so when they start to get in office, in our government office, they're going to start shifting and shaping the way these organizations are run. But it has to start somewhere. And so, like, you know, our president on our campus said, hey, I'm going to keep this 8 hours of telework. For a lot of people, they may say, well, that's not enough compared to what I'm seeing my friends get, but it's still something.
Right.
And so I think if we continue to push the narrative that, like, that 8 hours works, how many people on their timesheet are actually checking that they telework? Because that's statistics that they're probably looking at to say, oh, well, now many people aren't really using it, so why do we still have it? That's why I encourage you all to do it, because I think it's important that we do these things, because it starts to shift and shape other people's minds. And yes, to Nate's point, there are some jobs that you can't have as much flexibility, right? Like the garbage people can't not go pick up the garbage every day, right? In a place. But again, to Nate's point, like, find the lifestyle that you want and then make the job fit that. If you want to be a nurse, a lot more flexibility, right? Like they sometimes work 3-day shifts and then they're off for 5 days. 4 days. I can't count. It's okay. But you see what I'm saying? So like, there are ways to make it work, but you have to figure out what type of lifestyle you want. And sometimes that doesn't come until you're 30.
Mm-hmm.
But you always have to kind of keep thinking about what is it that you want to achieve in life.
Sydney, anything?
Y'all summed all that up.
All right, so we're going to move on to some past work experiences. So we all offer different work experience. So I want to hear about some of your past experiences, both in athletics and in other fields you've worked in, and how work-life balance was present or absent.
Okay, I guess I can start this off. I guess my history, I've been in a few different professions before working in collegiate athletics. And so say I was a personal banker. I worked in a bank. I did sales for the Cincinnati Bengals. So I worked in professional athletics as well. I did insurance. So I did a few different things, and some of those industries were not as flexible. Like the bank cannot close. You get what I'm saying? Like they have to be open for so many reasons. So I think that while they gave you PTO, which was cool, that's the first time I experienced that. You did have to get up every day and kind of work like a 9 to 5 corporate lifestyle. I think working in collegiate athletics, you work more than that, whether you working, staying late for SAC or a different program, attending games to support students. So I think it varies a lot. But I also think when you think about work-life balance, a lot of being able to obtain that comes with leadership. like like we just said, the Gen Z is going to make those changes. But if there's leaders in place where I was working or where I work now who make these changes and allow us to kind of take those breaks, mental health days, things of that nature, then that helps with obtaining that work-life balance.
I mean, I can jump in. Similar to Nate, like my first like full-time job out of college, I was working for a financial organization. It wasn't a bank, but like we were doing probably more of the like fidelity type of work, right? Those 401ks. And, you know, for me, the job was easy because I wasn't actually the one going to meet with clients, right? I was in the background doing a lot of the paperwork. But life was easy. I went to work at 8:30. I was done at 5 o'clock, you know, which meant I got all this extra free time to go hang out with my friends because I was still working here. And then I got into college athletics and it was like, yeah, so free time, what's that? Right? Because, you know, to Nate's point, like you're trying to figure out where you fit in. You're trying to make sure you're making appearances at places, right? So you're going to games and you're doing all of these things. And that's really easy to get burnt out because you're trying to catch up and still be like on the forefront of things. And so I would say very early on in this industry, like I said earlier, like I had no work-life balance. And now you gotta catch me when you can, right? Like, and that's the crazy thing, right? Is like we get so much done within our unit and are still like available to our students all the time. There's so much more time that like, and I'm going to point out Anderson because we talked about this at our event on Tuesday. Like we had an event on Tuesday from 6 to 7:30 and you was like, listen, I'm trying to go to the Rod Wave concert. And in my head, I'm like, yeah, back then I wouldn't have done all of that. But like you was like, I'm ready to go, right? Like, and I'll show up tomorrow morning to get my job done. And so like that's what I love. And I like to see that. And you end up going, but like just even having the thought process to want to go, yeah, I wouldn't have had that back then.
Listen, it's dedication.
Shout out to Rod Wave, by the way.
Right. Nate was right there with me. He was trying to go too. But to piggyback off of that, I mean, I don't have much experience besides like retail and like a graduate assistantship. But I feel like work-life balance didn't really exist when I was in grad school because I was in grad school. So it's like I was working a full-time job, doing a grad assistantship and doing like just regular grad school work. So it's like there really wasn't a balance in my life. I kind of just did things when I could. And then I know we'll touch on like how we feel about work-life balance with Maryland Made later. So that's my answer for that question.
So I will say my two first experiences prior to here. The first one, there was work-life balance. I actually worked at both at the same time. So during the day, I worked at the NAI Eligibility Center, and there were times where they required overtime. So that took up my whole Saturday. That took up the Sundays, especially during those like peak times. So there really wasn't work-life balance. Because in addition, I was a event intern for the Kansas City Urban Youth Academy as well. And so during the week, right after that, in a IA position, that's when I would go and be the event intern, prepare for those, events on the weekends. So they're really, because I was, planning events or prepping, or there were camps throughout the day. So sometimes when they did need me at the eligibility center, I was at the Urban Youth Academy. So then it really wasn't much, work-life balance. So I'll say like I was missing some birthday parties, although like I was, back home in Kansas City at the time. But I'll say in addition to the other positions I had, which were, similar to Sydney's, like, retail, or like sometimes they were fast food, depending on the position. Like I was at Nike prior to here, and it was not much work-life balance because Nike did not close. It could be a hailstorm, a rainstorm, snowstorm, and Nike did not close. So we, had to be open. But I will say there was some flexibility. We were super fully staffed. So like sometimes there was that work-life balance in that position as well.
Perfect. And do you guys feel like COVID shifted the way people work? If so, what have been some of the changes that you've seen? I'll say from my seat, like obviously a lot of people would rather work from home or work remote some days out of the week. I've seen a lot more like just remote only jobs, which is interesting to see because it's like I feel like before COVID that didn't exist. And yeah.
Yeah, I
I'll
mean, go ahead, Nate.
I was gonna say I'll see changes in like meaning. I think it's like helpful and not helpful at the same time, because when you're in person, you have to account for like moving from meeting to meeting. Where now you can set up Zooms, but your schedule could be filled with more meetings because you just click one and out. So I've definitely seen that. And then I was just in a meeting with the UCC, and they were talking about trends from seniors, and I guess more people are looking like recent grads are looking for hybrid roles where they have the ability to go in and then they have the ability to also work virtually. So that's good. I mean, I can save companies, electricity bill. It can save. It could be. It was definitely a game changer in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think COVID definitely shifted at least the way I work, right? Like, I've been in this industry 13 years. I never thought I'd see a day where I'm like, I'm good. I'll work from home today. I know I can get a lot of stuff done in the office, but like now being at home, I feel like my creative juices flow a lot more because I'm not being interrupted as often. And not to say the interruptions are bad, but there are days when you want to get a certain project done, or you have a ton of emails that you want to check, but every 5 seconds somebody is coming to you for something. Like, so I enjoy the remote work. I also have seen a lot of our industry, specifically athletics, the industry has like a 48% turnover right now because people are looking for that flexibility, whether, to Nate's point, is a hybrid job or if it's just fully remote. I think people learned through COVID that they don't have to be just their job, that they could be a lot more than that. And so I'm interested to see. I mean, in some ways, we're still in COVID. I saw an article yesterday that we're entering year 4 of this, which is kind of mind blowing. But I wonder what we look like 10 years from now. Does hybrid work? Does fully remote work actually work, or will we see the industries change back to being fully in person? I also wonder, to Nate's point about like, saving money on light bills for companies, like if some of these organizations aren't putting money into their facilities, is that money being filtered to people's paychecks? Because that makes a difference too.
I also like to add something to kind of pose a question, because I saw a video recently that talked about how while COVID-19 happened, people were able to work remotely. Young professionals kind of lost out on like the mentorship or experience from working side by side with like more veteran type of coworkers. So like, how do you think that might affect young development or personal development, or just even experience for younger professionals?
I'm gonna look at Sydney and Sydney since they're probably the younger group.
I feel like when COVID struck, I was just going into grad school, but I feel like a lot of there was a lot of opportunities to connect like via classwork. So it's like we had to do informational interviews. So it's like they kind of set us up to have guest speakers to do informational interviews as assignments, just so we were building that network still. And I feel like just in general, just talking to people. So I don't necessarily know if it would have been different if I would have like went straight into working, because I would have been mainly like remote. But I think being in grad school during like the COVID pandemic and stuff like that, it kind of helped me to do those informational interviews or to just have guest speakers and stuff like that.
I will say, for me, as far as like being a young professional, that mentor connection, like I have mentees and a lot of them were not in close proximity. So like we were on FaceTime, we were on Zoom calls, I was attending like conferences, like in person, before COVID, and then, symposiums like virtually. So I was still able to continue those relationships. I will say, as far as working with student athletes now, with a lot of them having a year or, a couple years, whether in high school during COVID, I think they are kind of missing like that connection of not, like being in person. So kind of just going with Resa said, in the next couple years, if more jobs are like remotely, like I'm interested to see like what that looks like, like as well, because as many people as like I've kind of talked to about like the changes of that COVID year, and interacting with people, whether it's just like meeting new friends, or like going out places, like a lot of people are not wanting, like not wanting to do that because of like the disconnect of COVID, because, they weren't around as many people to kind of get out of that comfort zone and that shell. And I will say, I think sometimes like that's how I am, because like I would just go out and put myself out there at, like a restaurant, or like meet, random people at different networking events. But like with COVID, I was just used to hopping on a Zoom call with people that like I was comfortable with. Like I stopped, jumping out of my comfort zone in that avenue. So I think it's still a challenge. But I'm interested to see, what happens with that in the future.
And your comment about the student athletes just made me think of something else. Although I did have that, I was able to connect with people via like the informational interviews and through class in grad school. I did do a graduate assistantship. And I will say it was harder to connect with like people in the office just because we weren't always in the office. So it was a little more challenging to learn different things just because you're not interacting in person with people.
I mean, I will just say this. I think for people who are introverted like myself, which I know is hard for people to believe, but extroverted for this job, but very introverted, I think those folks really suffer, right? Because social anxiety is real. And so, yeah, it's safer and easier to be at home. And yes, people probably don't get to know who you are and don't have an opportunity to vouch for your work as a person because you're stuck behind a screen. So I think it hurts in that aspect. But I also, for even our extroverted people, I think some of that social anxiety still exists. And so how do we create or have conversation about dealing with social anxiety post COVID-19 in the working world?
And how have you guys either felt encouraged or discouraged to have work-life balance in your schedule?
I'll personally say I've been encouraged, but I think it's all through leadership though. So shout out to Resa for creating this environment where she's kind of pushing that on you, like take the time off if you need it, or I think that's important because I've been in a situation when that was not the case, and they're gonna work you to the ground and still feel a type of way. So I think, yeah, I'm appreciative of that.
I agree with that. And I always say this, like, I feel like I'm a little bit scared to go to another position once I leave Maryland, or because it's like, I don't think I will get the experience that I'm getting here as far as work-life balance anywhere else, unless, the narrative changes.
I mean, I will save my answer. So, Sydney, if you want to add something.
Okay. I will say I used to discourage myself because, kind of like I mentioned before, I didn't really know what that work-life balance was like. But yes, kudos to Resa, because Resa will tell me, Sydney, you need to go for a walk. It's time for you to go. What do you need to, you're done for the day. And not only her, but like the team does that as well. So kudos to the team. Because sometimes you just need that extra push for, that work-life balance, because we all need it.
I got something else to add, and I think this is kind of like maturity and like knowing, like self-belief. Like I'm worthy of taking a break. I worked hard. You know what I'm saying? I think like early on, I used to be like, dang, I could still, I just hard on myself. But like that's major though. I think so.
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo what Nate started with. It definitely is predicated on who your supervisor is, right? Like there are a lot of people who, when I was coming up through this industry, believe like you walk through that door, you in here till 5, 6, 7 o'clock, you eat lunch at your desk, like, people, breaks weren't a thing, right? And so I think I learned that based off of who my next supervisor was. They're like, no, like you can work out in the middle of the day and that's absolutely okay. And when I first got there, I was like, you're doing what? I don't, right. And so I think leadership has a lot to do with whether you can be encouraged to like just get up and go for a walk, or be discouraged and just sit at your desk from 8 to 5.
Right. And Resa, ever since I've been with the Maryland Made team, kind of touched on this a little bit, but I believe you have made your stance on work-life balance very clear. So can you share your overall philosophy with our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've created our unit in a space where I want people to have fun. I want you to enjoy what you do every day. And I can recall at least 2 times in my career within this specific industry where I've been burnt out from the work, right? This industry will wear you down if you allow it, because especially thinking about the work that we do, right? Like we're doing night programs for students, sometimes weekend programs for students. This industry kind of asks you to be at games, even though it's not necessarily a requirement of your job. You also then still have the day-to-day functions that you have to do. And so, like I said, my first supervisor in this industry was like somebody who believed like 8 to 7 was like a daily thing, and like you ate lunch at your desk. And the days that my colleagues and I would go out to lunch for like an hour, she'd be standing at the door waiting, like, where you been, right? And it was a really weird concept because I never had that before. And then I transitioned to another job, and my supervisor was coming in at 10 o'clock because she had kids, and she would go work out at 12 o'clock. And then I'm like, she just got here, right? And so like I started to shift my mindset to be like, dang, like you can still get all of your work done and still take care of yourself through this process. So when I got here, I was like, listen, we got a mountain to climb because we're building this program from scratch. But at the same time, like I need you to be okay, whether that's you need to go home for a weekend, you need to take a day off, like whatever that looked like. And so as we started to add more staff to us, and then obviously COVID-19 shifted things and we got these 8 hours, and I was like, well, we was already getting 8 hours before that, because if we had 2 programs in a week, I told my staff not to come to work on Friday because you've already spent 40 hours at work in my mind, right? Like if you want to work from home, great, but like I don't want to see you on a Friday if we've worked here all week. And so now with this 8 hours, everybody has the day that they can choose. And if you need more than that, like let's have a conversation. And then if we have a night program, if you want to come in later in the day, like again, let's have that conversation. I think so many people are fearful to ask their supervisor because they don't know their supervisor's stance. But on the interview process with me, we talk about this because I need you to be okay. If something happens at home, all right, let's figure out how to get you there, right? You just need a mental health day because the world is beating you down. Take the day off. If you're sick, take the day off, right? Like all of those things, I think, make us a better team, make us have more fun, because you can show up and just be who you are. And I think that's really important to me.
Be who you are, do what you want. Hashtag protect Resa at all costs. That's all I'm gonna say. So thank you for sharing that, Resa. We appreciate you as a staff. And I can only imagine how this will make us as leaders one day. So now we're gonna go on to a little rapid fire. So, y'all ready?
Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it.
First one, sweatpants or slacks?
Sweatpants.
I mean, I think it's evident by the sweatshirt I'm currently wearing. Sweatpants and sweatshirts.
Sweats.
Same.
I knew
Zoom
Nate
call-
was going to say slacks, though. I thought Nate was
I
saying
know.
Really?
I was like,
Dapper Nate
which
over
one
there.
is Nate? All right, next one. Zoom calls or FaceTimes? I'm definitely FaceTimes.
FaceTime.
FaceTimes now that you can do group FaceTime all day, every day.
Yep, that's a good one.
You can share your screen too.
It's just
So
even better. Workout at home or in the gym? I hate gyms, so I'm at home
Pre-COVID, it was
person.
the gym, but after COVID, give me home all day.
gym. Going to the gym.
Work out at home.
Okay, go out for lunch or cook at home? Listen, y'all know I love a good doba.
It's depending on who cooking at home. If Nat cooks something good, cook at home.
Right.
But
Go out for lunch.
I normally go out for lunch though, which is terrible.
I know. I gotta do better. 2023, we coming for you.
falling on a budget.
All right, start the day early and finish early, or start the day late and finish late.
Start
Start
early,
early.
finish early.
I'm starting late, finish late.
I'm not a morning person, so I think I'm late and late.
I was gonna say, I think I'm the only morning person on this team.
Where do you work from home? Home.
So I have an office, but sometimes I like to sit in the kitchen. It's a lot of sunlight downstairs, so
I have a desk. I like the desk, or I like coffee shops. You know, I like the coffee
Mm.
shop vibe.
I have a desk, but somehow I always end up working from home in my bed. Gift and a curse.
I saw this guy had a setup of like this desk that he made that slides down on his bed. So it's like a desk setup in the bed. And I was like,
Ooh.
genius.
I need the link.
It's finest.
Send the link. Okay. Music or no music while working?
Music.
Gotta go with music.
Music.
I rotate between music and TV. If it's a show I've seen before, TV sometimes.
Yeah, just playing in the background. That's calm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And remote work here to stay, or will you go away?
Stay. We need to keep that.
I think stay.
I think stay too. I think a nice little hybrid. It's calm. And the last one, your favorite work from home necessity.
So I have two. Ring light, and then I have a little phone stand. So my phone sits up all day long and I can see the messages coming a little bit easier.
Okay.
I'll say my speaker. I love my music. So I'm gonna keep it going. That.
Sydney?
I have two. I have a mini speaker, and then I have one of those like waterfalls that makes music. So if my speaker dies, I have the waterfall that has music on it.
Interesting. I'd say mine is a blanket. I like to be cozy while I work from home. So gotta be wrapped up in a blanket. But this was great, guys. Thank you for joining today. Thank you, listeners, for listening. We hope that you tune in more for another Maryland Made podcast. But as of now, stay blessed and unstressed.
See y'all.
See ya.